Saudi female influencer faces unimaginable penalty for advocacy posts. Manahel al-Otaibi, a 28-year-old fitness instructor in Saudi Arabia, faces an uncertain but potentially severe sentence for her social media advocacy. Arrested for posts supporting liberal reforms, including women's rights and LGBT rights, she has been charged with defaming the kingdom and calling for rebellion against public order. Her case is being handled by the Special Criminal Court, originally established for terrorism cases, but now increasingly used against activists, raising concerns about the severity of the penalty she may face. Lina al-Hawthulu, a human rights activist, lamented the disparity in treatment between Saudi nationals and Westerners, saying, quote, "They say they welcome women and that women can wear whatever, but at the end, what is happening is that it is only for Westerners." Al-Haflu's statement underscores the ongoing repression despite claims of liberalization, as al-Otaibi's case reveals the stark limitations on freedom of expression in the ultra-conservative kingdom. So I wanted to cover this story because this woman seems like a total badass. And this isn't new to her. I was looking for photos of her online, and I found photos of her from like several years ago of her walking around Ridya, like without an abaya or anything. And she's been documented as being this activist for women's rights and for reforms and against like male guardianship and stuff, etc. And I mean, this woman is just such a badass, like living in Saudi Arabia and making the kinds of posts that she was making publicly. So I'll read a little bit of background from the Associated Press. Al-Otaibi, who posted fitness videos on Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat, faces charges, like I said, of defaming the kingdom and calls for rebellion against public order, society's traditions and customs, and challenging the judiciary and its justice, quote unquote. Her posts include advocacy for liberal dress codes for women, LGBT rights, and the abolition of the Saudi male guardianship laws. Documents also accuse her of appearing in indecent clothing and posting Arabic hashtags that include the phrase "overthrow the government." It's not clear how many years of imprisonment she could face, though activists fear it could be lengthy. And this is particularly scary considering that we covered this story a few months ago. The case of Salma al-Shihab, who was a former doctoral student who was studying at Leeds University in the UK, who went back home to visit Saudi Arabia, and she got captured and she's currently serving, a 27-year sentence. This is a mother of young children because she simply liked posts by feminist activists and followed them and like maybe retweeted a few, but she didn't make any of her own activism posts against the kingdom. And she made these posts when she was outside of Saudi Arabia. And she's facing a 27-year sentence because of that. So imagine what al-Otaibi is facing, because she's been doing this whole time, in Saudi. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I think about stuff like this and I think that I never deserve to be called brave or courageous when there are people like this out in the world. Or I know there are, female members of our Atheist Republic community in Iran. And I mean, I can't even talk about what they do publicly in Iran, right, for their own safety. But I know what their activism is, and I know what they risks they face. And I know these people personally. So I'm like, I never deserve to be called brave while I know people literally doing that firsthand, like right now. It's, I don't have words. Armin, what do you think about all this?
Okay, I think this is a very important reminder to people that what's happening in Saudi Arabia, it's not all in the right direction, okay? I want people to understand the way that I try to categorize the types of freedoms that we think about in my mind is to cut it into three parts, right? Social freedom, economic freedom, and political freedom, right? So social freedoms are very good for business. Very good for business. Technically, all those freedoms are good for business, especially the economic freedom. But when Saudi Arabia, what's happening is that there's in one direction it's becoming more liberal, and in another direction it's becoming less liberal, even compared to before. So because among all these three freedoms, which one of them, Susie, which one of these three freedoms are the most visible one? From economic freedom, political freedom, and social freedoms.
Social freedoms.
Social freedoms, right? So if Saudi Arabia is trying to give off an image of modernization, so it welcomes the world in for both tourism and investments, the way that it does that is by liberalizing when it comes to the area of social freedoms. But all these three freedoms are beneficial to the public, but not necessarily to the people in power. The people who want to stay in power, there's two types of freedom that if they give away, it might challenge their own authority. One is the economic freedom, and the other one, the most important one, is the political freedom. So if you want to hand out freedom to people to give the signal to the world that we're modernizing so that you can attract investment and tourism, it will be the social freedom. But that is dangerous because if people get too eager for freedoms, okay, they might challenge your authority. So at the same time, you want to reduce the political freedom. So that's what you're saying. And the political freedom is the most important one of all these three. Why? Why is the political freedom the most important of all these three? Because the other two depends on that. Because if you have economic freedom and if you have social freedom and you don't have political freedom, you technically don't have those other freedoms. It's not really a freedom, it's a gift from top down that could be given and could be given away. The only way that you could make sure that you actually have those other freedoms is by being able to control your own destiny. And the way you control your own destiny is with the political freedom. And the most important freedom among political freedoms is freedom of speech.
Let them
Also,
know.
there's
Let's
freedom
talk
of
about it. Go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go for
There's
it. This
freedom
is
of
what I'm here
assembly.
for. This is what I get worked up about. Go for it, Armin.
Freedom of protesting, freedom of assembly, freedom of choosing your politicians, but most importantly, the freedom of speech, because all the other rights and freedoms depend on this one right. And Saudi Arabia, when it comes in that area, Saudi Arabia is becoming more illiberal, even compared to before. Even compared to before. They're hunting down dissent. And as bad as Saudi Arabia was before, it was never this bad. It's even getting like they have no tolerance when it comes. And some people, unfortunately, some people from our side, from among atheists, are sometimes celebrating it because some of this dissent is coming from Islamic scholars, right? And they're being hunted down because they're challenging the authority of the House of Saud. This is a war between the House of Wahhab and House of Saud. Some people love that. They're like, oh my God, they're going after scholar imams. And we love that. But this dissent is not, first of all, you should not want that because people should be able to be free to say whatever they want. But there's also a lot of secular activists that are being hunted down in a way that they weren't before, even in Saudi's history, with the excuse of terrorism, just for liking tweets, or reposting stuff. That was not the case before in Saudi Arabia. It's getting worse. So, by the way, we're still celebrating the increase in social freedoms in Saudi Arabia. You could do that. You could bring attention to the fact that people are being hunted down just for speaking out in Saudi Arabia, while celebrating the extra social freedoms. These two do not contradict each other. Just because you're celebrating one, that doesn't mean that you're approving of the other. But it's important that while we do that, we do not celebrate the people in charge for doing it because they are not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They're desperate. They know fossil fuels are not going to be generating revenue forever. and they are desperate because it's the time for fossil fuels might be the end of the time for fossil fuels as a revenue generation might be coming to us faster than a lot of people anticipated. And Saudi Arabia, if that happens too fast, Saudi Arabia could go bankrupt so fast. They are terrified. They are losing sleep at night, and they need to diversify the economy really, really fast. And for that, they need to modernize. So this is not, you shouldn't be congratulating the monster that is Mohammed bin Salman, because this man is uh, partly, mostly responsible for the greatest humanitarian crisis of our lifetime in Yemen. So that guy is a monster. But given that he's forced to liberalize, at least when it comes to social freedom, the effect that has on some people, we could enjoy that and we could celebrate that. That's good. As long as we are remembering what else is happening in Saudi Arabia and what else Saudi Arabia is doing outside of the borders in Saudi Arabia to maintain power. And remember, some of these social freedoms, one of the purposes is to distract from those other crimes that they're committing, including this one that we're seeing right here. So celebrate the social freedoms that Saudi Arabia is bringing, but don't let them distract you from stuff like this right now here. And that's what we're doing here on Atheist Republic. We're trying to make the
Exactly.
distraction method not work. We're trying to bring this to you so that Mohammed bin Salman of showing you flashy things, Justin Bieber concert, I don't know, having Halloween, a woman without hijab, all this like limitations on Islamic practices, all of that is meant to distract you from this, and that it shouldn't work. It shouldn't work. You should pay attention to those, but you should also pay attention to this.
Yeah, I thank you, Armin, and I really appreciate how you always bring up the situation in Yemen into this. Like, and Watcher also says it very well. He's saying kids are eating their hands in Yemen while people celebrate concerts, sports, and wrestling in Saudi Arabia. Never forget that. Exactly. It's really important to keep that in mind. And I just want to highlight a few things in the live chat. You kind of already addressed this, but Pakistan Defense
Yeah,
Force saying, I thought Saudi Arabia was becoming liberal. Well, yeah, it's not all that it seems. D, our lovely editor, is saying, they are saying that activism equals terrorism. Yeah, exactly. This comes from above. You are not allowed to fight for it yourself. And never forget that. That's what the message is. Contemporary Cooper is saying, is there any way that I can support her? I think the best way that you could support her would be to raise awareness about her case, like just make posts about it. So in the live chat, I put the hashtag of her name, Manahel al-Otaibi. So yeah, if this is important to you, like talk to people about it. Talk to even just regular people in your life about it. That helps because it raises awareness and more people even think to keep this on their radar, you know what I'm saying? And make posts about it. It actually does help. And D is saying Saudi Arabia's execution rate was almost doubled since King Salman took the reins in 2015, appointing his son, Mohammed bin Salman, to key positions. Yes, this is also important to keep in mind. And last thing, we got a super chat from our own lovely Newman. He's saying, appreciate your work, AR. Keep it up. Thank you, Newman. Thank you for the live chat. And also, you know what I was thinking about recently? I was thinking about how I wanted to personally tell Newman and also Young Atheist, who's a member of our community in Pakistan, that I'm proud of them. Yeah, I'm proud of them. You know, like I know they're both young people and they live in communities and situations where they don't feel like they can be themselves or like be around like-minded people. And I know that's got to be difficult. But the good thing is you're still very young, which means that you have the ability and opportunity to work, I don't know, maybe a little bit day by day to build a life that you would like more for yourself. So I'm proud of you guys for sticking with it. And I don't know, I'm excited to see what you do with your life. These are some cool kids we have in our community. Sorry, I just needed a moment to be wholesome.
You mean?
Oh, yeah.
Uh, Wait, Oxymoron is saying it's very strange. Armin cuts slack for Biden or Clinton, but goes on attack for MBS if it was intentional, as if it was intentional. First of all, it wasn't. Mohammed bin Salman's attack on Yemen was intentional. It was clearly intentional. What are you talking about? He clearly bombed ports and hospitals and schools and mosques as a weapon. He used hunger and as a weapon of war
Cholera.
against children. Yeah, and spreading disease. Disease and limiting access to medication to civilians as a weapon of war. What are you talking about? As if it was intentional? You clearly have no idea what you're talking about. And as much as I criticize Biden and Clinton all the time, but they have never done anything similar. Clinton, well, actually, I'll take that back. They both support. Yeah, they have. Oh. They have, and we have criticized them on this channel. We have criticized them on this channel, right? We so they have here's they have, but not to the point where MBS has, right? So the difference is that MBS is the sole person that was responsible for ordering and executing this attack on Yemen, right? Not the main person behind carrying out this plan. So what I say about Biden and Clinton is that they were people who greenlit the sanctions, for example, on Iraq, the sanctions that led to more than 500,000 children die.
What the
Right?
United States did to Iraq is unforgivable. Absolutely unforgivable.
And we have said this, in this channel, and this is before the Iraq invasion. Like everybody talks about like Iraq, and they only remember the things that happened after the Iraq invasion. We are talking about the things that happened. Well, we constantly talk about the crimes that was committed by the United States government. Constantly, we mention that, right? So you are delusional to say that we don't mention that. But the difference is that Biden and Clinton were part of a much bigger thing, the entire foreign policy plan, but they did greenlit it. So they are involved. They are at fault. Okay. But the difference is Mohammed bin Salman is the person that ordered those attacks and carried it out, was behind the policy to go to war in Yemen. So again, still Mohammed bin Salman, I think, is a bigger monster than these people. But yeah, Biden and Clinton still at fault, and we still condemn them.
I want to address something really quickly. Shifa is saying Susanna has a lot of pro-American bias. Okay, so my American bias is a little bit complicated. Okay, I'm very critical of my own country, and there's so much stuff that we've done that is like literally unforgivable that boggles the mind. I think my bias comes from the fact that there are certain ideals that we represent in some of our founding documents that I think are ideals that are worth aspiring to, even though we constantly and chronically fail to live up to them. And also, my pro-American bias is also a little ironic because I think that I have a running theory that I've been developing that if you're an American in one way or another, you're out of your mind. And we're just crazy. We're crazy. I love that Americans are so publicly insane. And so I get a lot of amusement out of how crazy we are. So a lot of my like nationalism is actually like making fun of ourselves. Anyways.
The United States is not one thing. The United States is responsible for some of the greatest evil, but some of the greatest services and progress in the world. The United States is the country that has committed some of the greatest human rights violations, but it's also the country that shows up first whenever there's a natural disease, a natural crisis like an earthquake. Is responsible for inventing a lot of medication that has saved the world. Is responsible for the internet.
We give a lot of aid.
It's responsible for the computer. It's responsible for most of the technology that is lifting the entire planet is coming from the United States. So it's a superpower. So of course the effect of it is going to be huge on the planet, both the positive and the negative. It's not just one thing. The United States is many things, and there are many great things about it, and there's many bad things about it. You can't just look at it the entire thing. But also Shikha is like, you're delusional. Shikha is saying you started mentioning because you're getting a backlash for being too much pro-American. Shikha, you have no idea what you're talking about. I have been speaking about these things for
years.
more than a decade before you even knew who we were talking about these things. You are completely delusional. You have no idea what you're talking about. You have no idea what our history is. There's that.
Also, I'm just mentioning it to clarify because people might get confused about why I talk about things the way that I talk about it. I think that, America, we're called the Wild Wild West for a reason. Marvelous saying Susanna isn't biased, she's bi. True.
D has a good point though. They say the world condemned using starvation as war tactics is that how you read it? Biafra, but mostly silent about Yemen. Oh yes, well actually you're right. The double standard is on the other side. People are like, you constantly talk about Yemen, but you don't talk about war crimes of the United States. Actually, maybe we should be talking more about the war crimes in Yemen than the war crimes in Iraq, because everybody else is talking about the war crimes of the United States. How many people are talking about the war crimes in Yemen? You know what? Maybe we're actually talking too much about the war crimes of the United States, given that everybody, including Americans, constantly want to mention that. How many people, people have it in the live chat here, right here, saying like, wait, what happened in Yemen? People don't know about Yemen. People don't know what happened in Yemen. Everybody knows what happened in Iraq. So you guys are actually hypocrites. You guys who are adding to all the condemnations of the United States that everybody else is doing, and you think you're pro-human rights, adding to the same point that everybody else and their dog is making. Are you going around and talking about Yemen? No, because it's popular to be anti-American. You think you're so cool being anti-American, like, oh, America this and that. You sound like everybody else. You're nothing special. Maybe talk about human rights crimes, human rights violations that nobody else is talking about. How about that? How about trying that? How many people in your life around you know what's happening in Yemen? How many people know? Maybe try addressing that a little bit. You fucking hypocrites.